everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. You're probably used to thinking about jazz chords as chords with a lot of notes, a lot of alterations and extensions. It's complicated and it's big and difficult to play. But actually most of the time when I'm comping or playing chord melody, then I'm relying on chords that have only 3 notes. And I think it's amazing how rich sounding and how many extensions and how much you can actually get out of just using 3 notes. And most of those chords are actually pretty easy to play. In this video I'm going to go over 8 types of 3-note jazz chords that you can check out. And that's going to range from Shell-voicings to Sus4 Triads, Quartal Harmony, Sus chords, and a few different sort of interval structures or cluster-like interval structures that you can also check out and incorporate for some really great sounds. The way I'm going to demonstrate the different jazz chords in this video is that I have one example that's one chorus of comping on the song Solar. You probably already know that. And then I'm gonna go over this example, and for each of the different voicing types that I'm using, you have like a way that I'm using it. I'm also just gonna talk a little bit about what they are and how you can practice them and explore them a bit further. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting chord voicings or arpeggios, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. The first chord that I'm playing is a basic shell voicing. So the first chord is a C minor major, and I'm just playing a C minor major shell voicing like this. And it's a 1-3-7 shell voicing. There's another type of shell voicing that I'll return to later. And also later in the video I'm going to show you how you can take these shell voicings and then turn them into some sort of cluster-like constructions that really work well for adding a lot of color to your comping. But this is just the basic shell voicing. I'm using it in a higher register. In this case I can get away with it because it's a minor major chord, so just having the C, the B and the E flat is already giving a lot of color to the chord. It is a sort of very strong sound anyway. But otherwise you can also use it as upper structures. Of course, the way that you're probably used to shell voicings would be sort of in the lower range, so something like the Freddie Green, or they work really well for playing like a samba. So those are the places where we first get used to the shell voicings. They're really useful for that, but you can also start working with them. So in this case, just as the basic shell voicing, but also as upper structures, as you'll see a few times later in the example. The way you want to practice this, actually the way you want to practice any chord voicing, is that you want to sort of understand the context that it's in and then just see whatever you can sort of construct by moving it through the scale. So in this case it's C minor major. The scale you would expect here is a C melodic minor scale, and if you move shell voicings on these 3 strings through the C melodic minor scale, then you get these voicings. The next chord that I'm using is also a shell voicing, but here we have an example of using a shell voicing as an upper structure, because I'm using a B7 shell voicing, but I'm actually using it over my C chord, because if you look at it like that, then it's a C minor, so we have the E flat with a major 7 and a 6, and if you want to call it a 13 or a 6, in this case it doesn't matter too much because this is anyway a tonic chord. But so we have this B7, and if you look at the example that I just played, the exercise just taking the shell voicing through the scale, you'll notice that on the B we don't actually have, we have this voicing, so we have a minor or a diminished, half diminished voicing, because that's the diatonic construction here. But we also have the E flat, so we can actually make a B7, and having this B7 in there for the C minor is a really nice sound, because it has really a lot of the colors with both the major 7 and the 6 and the 3rd in there. The next 2 bars is our cadence to F major. The first part of it is a G minor chord with this voicing, so that's also a shell voicing. So this is just another example of how you can use a shell voicing as an upper structure on a chord. And in this case it's actually incomplete, in the sense that I have a G minor 7 with a 9, but I'm not playing the 7. That's something you kind of have to hear in the context. And from there I move to a more complete voicing, which is this voicing for the G minor 7. And this is just basic B flat major triad. And this is something that's extremely powerful. The triads are enormously powerful in terms of just using them for different voicings, and you can get away with really vague things just using triads because they sound so strong and they're such a big part of our harmony that we can use them and we can leave out all sorts of stuff and still get it to sound right. So you definitely want to check out upper structure triads for that. In this case it's really simple. I'm using, if you look at a G minor 7, then that would be G, B flat, D, F, and I'm just leaving out the G, and then I have the B flat major triad. And it really makes sense to just get used to just using this basic version of the triads, and then from there, as you'll see later in the video, you can really do a lot by making it Sus chords, or by treating them in the same way that you would add extensions or colors to drop 2 voicings, and get some really interesting cluster-like chords also. So here we have that one. I'm moving to a C7 flat 9, and here I'm using a B flat diminished triad, so we have another triad structure, and I'm also resolving to a triad because on the F major 7 I'm using an A minor triad, which is just an F major 7 without the root. And of course, if you want to check this out, the first place you probably want to do that is just to take, so if we have the B flat major triad here, to take those kind of triads through the scale and then really think the root of the chord that you want to play. So that means that this is D minor 7, E half diminished, F major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7, B flat major 7, C7, and D minor 7. Another thing that's really useful about using the triads as 7th chord voicings is that if you have one triad that works, then immediately you can also start making inversions work for you. So just to demonstrate that, so if we have the C7, I'm using a B flat diminished triad here, and then if I invert that, I also have this. So that's also a C7 flat 9, and of course this is also a C7 flat 9. And that means that just by realizing this, I already have 3 different voicings that I can use and turn into sort of 2-5 ideas like this. The second bar of F major 7 is using Quartal Harmony, and here I'm just using first this voicing, which is sort of like an F, I guess it's an F sus2, and then this, which is an F6-9, and then I can just move up to this F minor 7, which is then essentially an F minor 7 with an 11. And the Quartal Harmony is of course just what we, I guess, at least to me, it's something that we connect with modal harmony. It kind of entered jazz when modal jazz became a thing, and that's also what we're using it for. Very often you'll find that when you're playing quartal voicings, so a quartal voicing can be all sorts of chords, so it's kind of difficult to say this is an F chord, or this is a D minor chord, or it's a B flat chord. It can be all sorts of things, and very often when you're using them, you're also using that you can move around stepwise in the scale. So definitely also a voicing that you want to check out just through the scale. And if I play these voicings through an F major scale, then I get this. And the way you want to practice using the Quartal Harmony, I think, is also really working on using this stepwise motion through changes and see what you can sort of get to work. And don't be afraid to play incomplete voicings in some places, because the sum of all the notes that you're playing will still get sort of a very complete picture across. So that'll work most of the time. So if I just play using more Quartal Harmony on this part of the song, so first the F major, and then moving up to F minor, and then moving up to B flat 7 altered, and then I could resolve that to these, and that's all using Quartal Harmony. It's fairly easy to work with, and there's usually, if you know your Quartal Harmony, there's usually sort of a voicing you can move to that's really close. Of course, in the main example, I'm not continuing with Quartal Harmony the way that I just did in this short interlude. So I'm moving from this F minor 7 voicing down to this F minor 7 with a 9. And this voicing, you can look at that as being, of course, the rootless version of this F minor 7 with a 9. Another way to think about it is also that it's a shell voicing, because this is a shell voicing that is a little bit less common. You can look at this as being an A flat 1, 5, 7 shell voicing. So we have A flat, that's the root, E flat, that's the 5th, and G, that's the 7th. And thinking of it like that, then we have a voicing that doesn't work too well as an independent voicing. We're used to shell voicings being stuff that will really spell out the basic harmony, and because we don't have a third here, we don't really get to spell out the basic harmony that much. So it doesn't work as well for that, but it's a great structure if you want to use it as an upper structure, and you're going to see it being used a lot if you start checking it out like that. The way to practice this, I think, is to take it through the scale, but then think about the root that you're not playing. So that means that you would play this and think F, even though there's no F in there. Or if you're starting down here, think C minor, even though you're not playing that note. The next voicing on the B flat 7 is this voicing, and that's another 1-5-7 shell voicing. You can look at that as being an A flat half diminished 1-5-7. So we have the A flat, there's no third, then we have the flat 5, that's a D, and then we have the flat 7, that's a G flat, and that's really spelling out like a B flat 7 with a flat 13. And then from there it moves on to another shell voicing. This is just a standard 1-3-7 shell voicing, which is this one. Now this is really coming out of the altered sounds. This is a B minor major shell voicing, but in this case I'm using it as a B flat 7 with a flat 9, and I'm really using sort of this interval to get the sound across, and I think that interval is that strong that I can do that, even though that means that I have to leave out the 7th from the chord. The E flat major 7 voicing that I'm resolving to now is this voicing, and that may seem a little bit like a mysterious voicing in an E flat context, because actually it's a G Sus4 Triad, and you can hear that as this. Of course, it's a Sus4 Triad, and in E flat the context would be a minor context, but it is a G Sus4. And the Sus triads are actually sort of a little bit overlooked, but they are really great for just having some adding some interesting color to the chords that you're playing. One way of looking at it is actually that normally you would have this type of E flat major 7, and that would be this G minor triad, and then I'm changing it into this G Sus4, and that's giving me a 13, a 7th, and a 3rd. If we take this voicing, and then take that through the E flat major scale, thinking of it as being, in this case, let's see if I can play this, so an E flat major 7 with a 13, then we get these voicings. As you can hear, we get some pretty interesting voicings out of just moving the Sus4 triads through the scale, and I think especially this one, which is a D diminished Sus4 that you can use as a B flat 7 with a 13, is a nice sort of voicing to explore. You could use this as a B flat 7 13, you can use it as a D half diminished, as a G7 Sus4 flat 9. You can also use it as a D half diminished voicing or an F minor 6 voicing. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for that, and I don't think it would be possible for me to make all these videos on such a specific topic as jazz guitar if it wasn't for them. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page, and if you join us over there, I can also give you something in return for your support. The next bar is a 2-5-1 in the key of D flat major, and the true chord that I'm playing here is this voicing. And the way to understand this voicing is probably to look at it as being derived from a triad. So I'm using it as an E flat minor voicing, and it's an E flat minor with a 9. It's an E flat minor 7 with a 9 that I'm using it as, but it doesn't actually have the 7 that would be the D flat here. And the way to understand how it's constructed is really just to look at it as coming out of this triad. So we have an E flat minor triad here, then instead of playing the root in the E flat, I'm playing the 9th, and then I have this voicing. This way of thinking is also how you would think about adding extensions to a drop 2 voicing. So you would take an A minor voicing like this, and then if you want to have a 9 in there, you find the root, and then you put a 9 in instead. That way of thinking can really build some interesting voicings out of the triads, as I already mentioned. If you take these voicings through the D flat major scale, then you get this. In this exercise, I'm using the add 9 to describe the chord voicings, and that means that sometimes you get an add flat 9 and some of the chords may have a little bit peculiar names and you can't immediately see what's going on. Of course, it makes sense that if I look at this voicing, I mean, if I add an E flat in the base of that, I think that's pretty clear that there's an E flat minor at 9 voicing, and that works really well, and you can take that through the scale, but there are going to be places where, for instance, the F minor at flat 9 is a bit peculiar, and that doesn't mean that you can't use this voicing, because of course it's also like an upper structure of an A flat 7 voicing, but you do need to sort of just check out what you can use, what it reminds you of, and how you might put it to use. The second part of that bar is this A flat 7 flat 9 voicing. I'm again using a shell voicing. I'm using an A minor major shell voicing to play that chord, to give me that flat 9, the third, and then the root. I'm resolving it to a D flat major 7 voicing, that's this voicing. And this voicing, I think it's a really beautiful voicing because it has these close intervals on top and still just some nice colors on it. It has the major 7, the major 3rd, and the 9th. So it's really just a major 7 with a 9. One way to look at how this could be constructed is to think of it as being sort of derived from a B flat minor triad. So again, this is triad derived, and we have this B flat minor triad. Then for the 3rd, I'm gonna exchange this for the 4th, and the root, so the B flat, I'm gonna exchange for the 9th, which is a C, and then I have this voicing, which makes for a beautiful D flat major 7 voicing. If you play that through the scale, it sounds like this. The next voicing is a really beautiful D flat major 7 voicing, which again is with a 9th. So we have this voicing that's root, 9, and then the major 7. So we don't have a 3rd in this voicing, but in the context that's not so necessary, I think. And as you can tell, this voicing is making life difficult for my notation software, because I can't actually notate this in the chord diagrams in Guitar Pro. So if you want to have that changed, then you have to send Guitar Pro or whatever that software firm is called an email. You can probably find them on Twitter. So that's the voicing. The way to look at this voicing is that it's derived from a 1-3-7 shell voicing. So of course it's a D flat major 7, and it's very similar to this D flat major 7 shell voicing. And then I just took the 3rd and replaced it with a 9. From here I move on to this D half diminished, which is just a basic F minor triad. And then the same type of voicing that I used for D flat, I'm now using from B. So I have B, D flat, and B flat. And that works really as a great G7 altered voicing, where we have sort of the major 3rd, the flat 5, and the sharp 9. If you want to check out some more different types of chord voicings that you can use, not only limited to the 3-note chord voicings, then check out this video where I'm going over sort of the 9 most common types of chord voicings that you're going to come across in jazz. If this is the first time you see one of my videos and you want to learn more about jazz guitar, then subscribe to my channel.